Hello everyone, my name is Alan and I'm very happy to introduce the How to Patch video series. In this first episode, I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. Let's go. Alright, so this sound was made on a Mini Moog, so today I'm going to be using the Arturia Mini version 3, and you can see that I have two tracks here. In the first track, I have the presets that I'm going to use as a reference. And in the second track here, we're going to remake the sound from scratch, right? Let me just zoom in. And there we have it. We're going to use all three oscillators to make this sound, but oscillator number 3 is going to be our LFO to make the vibrato. This is the sound of just oscillator number 1. It's a blank sound, and the first thing I'm going to do is open up oscillator number 2 here. Detune by about 4%. And I'm gonna dial in the controls for the vibrato on oscillator number 3 later on, alright? Now I'm gonna move on to the filter because this is the most important part of this patch. First thing I'm gonna do is click both of these keys, and I'm gonna explain why later. Close the filter all the way down. This is the cutoff frequency knob. It's not just a manual control for the cutoff of the filter, but it's where you set the starting point for the action of the filter, right? So close this all the way down. Sustain is all the way up, and that's exactly what we want. I'm not going to use any resonance for this sound. And then 30% of contour. That's how much movement we want on the filter, okay? Now it's just a matter of figuring out the right attack time here. I recommend around 100 milliseconds. If you like a faster attack, you can go 80 or maybe 70 milliseconds here. If you like a slower attack, you can go all the way up to 200. That's too slow for me, but if you want, you can go that way. I recommend 100 milliseconds of attack on the filter, alright? Decay, you can match that 100 here. Just so it's easier to remember, 100 milliseconds of attack and decay on the filter. And that's basically it for the filter. Cutoff frequency all the way down. No resonance because we don't want to... Right? 30% of contour, 100 milliseconds of attack and decay, maximum sustain. Now, what are we going to do on the amp? Do you hear this? There's kind of a tiny pop in the sound, and that's because we have 100 milliseconds of attack on the filter, but we have no attack on the amplifier. That means as soon as I press the key, the amplifier is already amplifying the signal, but the filter isn't through opening yet. So you're hearing just the very lowest frequencies. The way to get rid of this tiny pop here is to add about 40 or 50 milliseconds of attack on the amp, just to smooth out the initial punch of the sound. "30 is okay, but I recommend 50 milliseconds at least of attack here. And we're also going to match this 50 milliseconds here on the decay as well. So 50 on the decay of the amplifier. This is easy to remember because it's 100 attack, 100 decay on the filter, 50 attack, 50 decay on the amplifier, alright? Sustain all the way up on both of these. We're almost there, we already have a pretty decent sound. But we still have this issue here. You hear that the filter is opening up a little bit more than we want. The way to get rid of that is by turning legato mode on. Now the filter won't open more than this 30% that we dialed in here. Okay? Now, before we dial in the vibrato here, I'm gonna go into advanced mode and add an additional chorus here. It's turned on, but it's completely dry, so you're not hearing the sound of the chorus. If I fade this in, the rate is too fast. I won't spend much time here in the chorus because you can dial in your own chorus, and choruses vary a lot from keyboard to keyboard, from plugin to plugin. But I like to add a chorus because it creams up the sound a little bit more. The first step of creaming up the sound is the 4% of detune here, and the second step is adding a chorus, alright? I used this chorus number 2 in the preset that you heard in the beginning of the video, but you have 3 options of choruses here on Mini version 3. I feel like this second chorus here is the best one for this particular patch, alright? Go easy on the depth. You don't want a chorus that's too deep, like this. Nor you want a chorus that's too fast, like this. So go easy on the rate and on the depth, alright? I'm also gonna add a delay because I'm not gonna add a reverb, but I like having a delay kind of like a reverb, you know. It's a pretty soft delay, maybe 5% wet here, just so that we have a little bit of a tail in the sound. You see? So chorus to cream up the sound and a delay to add a little bit of a tail. I'm not going to spend more time here, alright? So just chorus and delay. What we have so far is 2 sawtooth oscillators on the same octave, same volume, 4% of detune, and then on the filter we have 30% of contour with 100 milliseconds of attack and decay, and then 50 milliseconds of attack and decay on the amplifier. I'm going to add the vibrato here on oscillator number 3, and on top of that I'm going to add the Aftertouch functionality to trigger the vibrato, because that's pretty convenient if you don't want to use your left hand to trigger the vibrato here on the mod wheel. You can add Aftertouch to trigger the mod wheel so that you have vibrato just by pressing harder on the key. Bear in mind that not all keyboards have the Aftertouch functionality, alright? So to dial in the vibrato here, we don't need to turn oscillator number 3 on, but we need to switch the octave selector here to the low position. That means LFO. And then turn oscillator modulation on. Just before I show you this oscillator modulation, we have a vibrato by default here. But this vibrato isn't coming from oscillator number 3. This vibrato is coming from this LFO right here, alright? If you go into the modulation matrix, you can see that we have mod wheel modulates the amplitude of the LFO, and the LFO modulates the frequency of oscillators number 1, 2, 3, right? I'm gonna shut all of this off. And now we don't have that vibrato from the modulation matrix, alright? The original Mini Moog didn't have a modulation matrix or this additional chorus or delay. The Mini Moog was just this. So I'm gonna make a vibrato the old school way. Oscillator number 3 in the LFO position, turn oscillator modulation on. Now let me fade in the mod wheel to see what we have. What is that? That's the beginning of a vibrato, but it's in the wrong waveform. it's set to sawtooth. A vibrato is a triangular or a sine modulation, okay? But this feels too slow, right? And that's too fast. Why is the speed changing? Well, oscillator number 3 is attached to the keyboard. That means the higher up I go on the keyboard, the higher the frequency of oscillator number 3. But I want the vibrato to be in a fixed speed. How do I do that? I turn this key off. Now oscillator number 3 is detached from the keyboard, alright? Oscillator number 2 needs to stay attached to the keyboard because the frequency of an oscillator that we're hearing the sound of, like a sawtooth oscillator, like oscillator number 2, the frequency determines pitch. The frequency of an LFO determines the speed, right? So the speed of oscillator number 3 is what we set here on the frequency. Now, this is too slow, so I need to increase the frequency here. I think 19 semitones of speed is right. The unit here is semitones, but this is the frequency selector for the oscillators. So it's not exactly semitones, right? We're setting the speed. If we could see this in hertz, it would be better. But anyway, 19 semitones is good. We're almost there. The final touch is adding Aftertouch as the source of modulation and the destination mod wheel, right? The mod wheel is already triggering the vibrato. The higher up I move the mod wheel, the wider the vibrato is gonna be. So if I add another modulation before that, like an aftertouch before the mod wheel here, now I can make the vibrato a different way, just by pressing the keys harder. But I need to dial in the right amount here, so I'm gonna press really hard on the key so that I have the aftertouch triggered, and then I'm gonna dial in the right amount here. That's good. If I go all the way up, it's obviously too much. So yeah, 0.5, 0.4 something is okay. Now I don't need my left hand to move the mod wheel to have vibrato, right? It's a little too much for me, so I'm going to decrease here. I think 0.44 is nice. Let me just increase the volume a little bit and let us compare. This is the sound that we just made. And this is the reference, the preset from the beginning. They're almost identical, just the volume is a little bit higher here, so let me increase the volume. Maybe more. There are some minor differences, probably a decay difference, probably chorus difference here, but that's how you do it. Now let's recap everything that we've done, because if you understand everything that I did, if you understand all of the concepts, then you can remake the sound on any synthesizer that you want, right? 2 sawtooth oscillators, same volume, same octave, we just have 4% of detune. On the filter, we have 0% cutoff because this is the starting point for the action of the filter. No resonance, 30% of contour, 100 milliseconds of attack, 100 milliseconds of decay, and maximum sustain. And then 50 milliseconds of attack and decay on the amplifier, maximum sustain. The only detail that I forgot to mention is these two keys here. These are the keyboard controls, and these are pretty simple to understand. The same way that these two orange buttons here, they attach the oscillators to the keyboard, these two buttons, they attach the filter to the keyboard. That means the opening of the filter is going to change according to the keys that I play. If both of these are off, it's going to be the same opening of the filter for every key. If I turn one of these on, then the higher up I go on the keyboard, the brighter the filter is going to be, the more open it's going to be. If I turn both of them on, it's going to be an even steeper curve, right? The higher up on the keyboard, the more the filter opens up. Let me just show you the difference. If both of these are turned off, we can barely hear the sound, right? Because that's the true 30% of contour. If I turn one of these on, we can hear it a little bit better. The filter is a little bit more open. And if I turn both of them on, so really don't focus on the 30% here, because this 30% is actually varying because we have the keyboard controls on. This isn't exactly 30%, right? This is a lot more, but we want this because when we go down here, we want this opening. If we have like the same opening here, but we have no keyboard controls, let me just find it. 63%. You see, this is too open for me. This feels right, but this doesn't. So the filter has to vary. The filter has to be more closed here and more open here. So keyboard controls on, and then go back to 30%. Okay. And after that, I have added a little bit of chorus, a little bit of delay, and I added Aftertouch as another trigger for the vibrato before the mod wheel, right? I'm using oscillator number 3 as a vibrato. So it has to be on LFO mode. It has to stay detached from the keyboard. Otherwise, you're going to have a different speed for the vibrato for every key that you play. And the waveform has to be triangle or sine. The Minimoog doesn't have a sine wave here, so I'm using the triangular waveform. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching this episode of How to Patch, and if you enjoy learning how to program keyboard sounds from scratch, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Instagram. Also, you should check out my other video series called How to Play. Until next time.